As the haunting commences, Vergil realizes that he and Cana have become targets of the shade. Forced to leave their homes, they head to a mysterious shelter, Biringan, which harbors secrets. Can they survive the month of isolation? Thank you for your subscription and likes. I hope you will leave your comments in the comment area. Chapter 1. And that's all the news for today. This is Channel 11's very own, Mel Enriquez, reminding everyone that today marks the start of the haunting. Please make sure that your kids get their photos taken at the end of the day. Until next time, goodbye. It's that time of the year again, Mom said with a shaky voice. My parents are of age. They've had me in their late 20s, so now that I'm 16, the signs of aging are getting more pronounced. My mom made it clear that her flabby arms and the crow's feet around the corner of her eyes are forbidden subjects. I turned the television off as Mom sits down. Plates of chicken franks, pancakes, and fried eggs cooked sunny side up filled our table. There's also a pastry basket full of round, bread rolls next to a plate of cheese block, sliced to thin pieces. And for dessert, a custard pudding glazed with brown caramel sauce. And a deep pan of chocolate rice porridge. You made champorado, I said with a big grin and making sure the excitement in my voice is pronounced. I went to her side and give her a kiss on her cheek, something I don't normally do, but the occasion calls for it. I love you, Mom. The crease of her forehead tells me that that wasn't enough to take away her worry. I thought I should make your favorite, especially today. By any standard, this is a bit extravagant for an ordinary, everyday breakfast. Except today isn't a normal day. Today is the start of the month every parent with a teenager fears. The haunting is a paranormal phenomenon unique here in Bastillio, our small city located between Manila and Quezon. It starts in October of every year. During this month, a creature of living shadow we call shade haunts teenagers at night that often results in their deaths, making us the only city with haunted written as the official cause of death. Mr. Chua, our history teacher, taught us that the shade first appeared 50 years ago, the year after the mass kidnapping of the cult Mr. Chua said no one knows what they were called, as they were all killed during the massacre. However, as we are underage, explicit details about the kidnapping are omitted from the books. You won't find any articles about the cult, their church and belief system anywhere on the internet. Although he did say that the shade was like a floating silhouette of a man, even though he never seen it before himself. Back then, before UV lights were discovered to be an effective countermeasure against the shade, there was no way of stopping the supernatural shadow from latching on to their kids. They've realized how helpless they were, so they did the one thing they could do. Accepting the fact that every morning might be their kids' last, families started preparing lavish breakfast for their loved ones every day or for as long as they would live every October. But that was decades ago. Although no one still knows what the shade is exactly, at least we now have a system to identify who will be haunted. The word became the name for those who had been identified as targets of the shade. Best of all, we have the government shelter responsible for keeping haunteds alive. Anyway, the shelter has been doing a great job ever since. But the tradition sticks though, not that I'm complaining. That's why this year, my sophomore year, I'm not too worried. Maybe a bit curious. I also haven't seen the shade before, or had been identified as haunted before, or know someone who'd been haunted. And neither do my parents and my friends. Don't worry, Mom, I said, loading up my plate with pancakes. I'll be fine. He's right, honey, Dad said. He's the same age as my mom when they met way back in high school. One of those high school sweethearts that lasted forever, I guess. People always told me I looked like Dad. Fair skin, brown eyes, we even have the same straight black hair, only his have mixed of grays in them as if they were highlights. The wrinkles around his mouth and chin became more pronounced whenever he cracked a joke only other dads can appreciate. But when he's talking with Mom, somehow they don't seem so old all of the sudden. His cheeks are a bit chubby, too. He's an IT specialist, so maybe sitting all day does that. But as a dad, he's fun, got a big heart and an even bigger belly. We always joked about it. I would ask when he was due or am I getting a little brother or a sister, to which he would respond, beer, you're getting beer. Dad is of Spanish-Filipino descent, a mestizo. I learned in class that, historically, mestizo is used to describe Filipinos with Spanish blood during the Spanish colonial period, when the Philippines was under the Spanish Empire. but in modern times we use it to describe fair-skinned Filipinos like my dad. That's another unexpected effect the shade had on our city. According to Mr. Chua, for the first years of the news of the shade, it attracted all kinds of people to our city, from professional occult researchers and paranormal experts to thrill seekers, and even amateur vloggers. These people from different country and of different race had flocked to our city, all with different intentions. Some driven by curiosity, some saw an opportunity to boost their careers, some have the genuine desire to study to shade. Eventually, most of them settled here, making Bastillio their home. Combine that with the Philippines' history of being colonized by Spaniards, Americans and Japanese, and of Chinese migrating to the country, our city became a mixing pot of race and culture. So mixed race features is really a common sight here. The shelter works, Dad continued. It's been a couple of decades since the last incident, he said, wisely avoiding the word death. He then looked at me and motioned his head towards Mom. I'll be okay, Mom, really, I said, following his cue. I try to sound as reassuring as I can, but I'm paying more attention to the pancakes I'm spreading butter on. Her lips curled upwards a bit, making that half-smile she always does when she tries to hide her worry. So, are we still good this Saturday at Ocean Park? Mom said, changing the subject. I forgot that we had planned the trip this weekend. My parents surprised me with tickets to Ocean Park. The attraction, although fairly old, is quite popular. I'm the only one from our class who haven't gone yet. The main attraction was a transparent glass tunnel under the massive aquarium. My friends said that it was like walking under the seafloor while countless fishes and different marine creatures swim over your head. I hope she got the deal that includes a 10-minute scuba diving inside the aquarium. While my parents talk about our weekend plans, I drizzled maple syrup on my pancakes. Oh, the salty smell of butter mixed with the sweet, fruity scent of maple syrup makes my mouth water and my stomach rumble. I took a slice of the pancake and just inhaled the thing. Oh, it was so good. I forked in a couple of chicken franks, an egg, and took the entire custard pudding for myself. After brushing my teeth, I slung one strap of my backpack over my shoulder, slid inside my black Converse shoes, and was on my way out of the kitchen door. I'll be going now, I said. Take care, Vergil, Mom said, standing in the doorway. We'll see you later, okay? Or not, Dad joked, grinning beside her. Mom then hit him on his chest with the back of her hand. Stop that, she said, glaring at my dad. But Dad just hugged her from behind, still grinning. Thanks, Dad. I smiled, waving them goodbye as I left the house. I live just 3 stations away from school, so my daily trip was a short one. But when I pulled out my phone to check the time, I was 10 minutes away from being late. In my school, Padua High, each year level has its own building. This building I'm in now, Acacia Building, is for the first years. So I had to exit out of the opposite side to get to the second-year building, Nara Building. As soon as I swiped my ID at the scanner, I raced down the hall, weaving through crowds of students, barely managing to avoid bumping into a few. Running inside school premises is not allowed, but during the first day of the haunting, teachers are expected to have each of their students' pictures taken first thing in the morning, so I doubt I would run into one here. The reason being is because once you're identified as haunted, you will immediately be brought to the shelter. I don't understand the need for such urgency because the shade, as we were taught, only appeared after sunset, which is still at least a good 11 hours away. But I did hear rumors from past haunteds about their stay in the shelter. Surviving haunteds never appeared in TV shows or even tweet about their experiences. I don't know why groups of teenagers who live for the likes and internet fame would keep quiet about something like this over the years. So all we've got are rumors which supposedly came from them. Apparently, they were briefed and prepared for their nightly encounter with the shade. And there are only so many hours before the night comes, so I guess they want to make use of every hour they can get. But those are rumors from 10, 15 years ago when the system was fairly new. Things could have changed since then. I came out to the covered walkway connecting this building to the Nara Building. It was a beautiful day outside. The sky was clear and bright. A cool morning breeze was blowing over as I slowed down to a walk, not risking getting caught running any further. And as expected, the large, grassy field where our General Assembly is held daily was empty. I continued walking by an assortment of food kiosks and refreshment stands. I spotted Ms. Garcia, our teacher's assistant, sitting with, I assumed, other student teachers. According to her, if you want to be a teacher, you have to experience teaching for real before you graduate. I thought of saying hi, but seeing their table filled with disposable paper plates with half-eaten meals, their necks hunched down on laptops running Word documents and open textbooks and a bunch of notes, I thought it best not to bother her. I can't even imagine having to work while also preparing for your exams in school at the same time. Which reminded me of something even worse than the shade. Something all student dreads this time of the year: midterm exams. It may be a bit strange that no one gives a second thought to the supernatural monster that will come tonight. But I don't blame them. The shade had never killed other people except haunteds. At least that's what Mr. Chua told us. Then, there's that impeccable track record of the shelter keeping generations of haunteds safe. And I've never seen news or heard from someone about college students being haunted, which is probably why Ms. Garcia and her friends are not too worried. And it's not just them, even my classmates, who are just as caught in the middle of this deadly phenomenon as I am, are more scared of flunking the exam than being haunted. I even saw a documentary once, interviewing citizens of different countries abroad about the shade and the cult. Some say it's a hoax. Some say it's an exaggeration of something that did happen. One claimed that it was simply an urban legend told by students to scare themselves. Another one claimed it was nothing more than a publicity stunt from decades past, arguing that the lack of photographic proof of the shade proves his point. There really isn't any information of the shade and the cult in the internet, so it's no wonder foreigners are skeptical. Maybe the shade was the only headline around the globe 40, 50 years ago, but now that no one's dying and that the public never saw the shade again for years now, everyone moved on with their lives. The shelter and the system we have in place has been doing its job so well that people seem to forget that the whole thing is not normal. Chapter 2. My room was on the second floor, so when I reached the stairs, I bolted straight up. Out on the hallway, there were already long lines of students from different classes. Mr. Torres, Mrs. Misaki, the pale, bony teacher in charge of our class, greeted. "You're late. Again." I check my phone again. It's exactly 7 o'clock, so technically, I'm on time, but I decided not to say that. Mrs. Misaki has a very unique interpretation of tardiness. For her, on time is late, 5 minutes early is on time. And I found it best not to argue with her about punctuality, a lesson I learned the hard way. The first time we argued, she gave an impromptu lecture of the matter, specifically for me, while I stood awkwardly in front of the class. That day still makes me cringe every time. Yes, sorry I'm late. Fall in line, please, she said. Then she went to the front of the line to lead us down. Yes, ma'am, I went to the back of the line as the class filed downstairs. We were heading for the multipurpose hall to have our pictures taken. At least that's where we went last year. Hey man, one of my friends in class, Mark Santos, was also at the back. Hey, I said, nodding back. His black hair was unruly, like he just woke up from bed, put on his uniform and went to school. His brown skin cannot hide the dark, droopy bags under his eyes. You look dead. Yeah, he yawned. I've been catching up. Just last night. I asked. I'd been studying hard for the last 2 weeks, and I'm still not confident about the test. How far have you gotten? As far as Arabasta Arc. I blinked. First, because I thought he meant he was studying last night. Second, he's still at Arabasta Arc, so that means he just started watching One Piece. But hey, better late than never. You weren't cramming or anything. Cramming is for losers, he said while yawning. Seriously, just listen to class. It's a lot easier. Now, that would have been inspiring, but this was coming from someone who binge-watched anime the night before a major exam. When we got inside the multipurpose hall room, a girl was having her picture taken with the white wall as her background. There was a long line of students starting from Class A working down till Class E. The queue was moving fast, at least only half of Class A remained inside. It wasn't long before our class, Class C, was next. When it was my turn, I stood in front of the tripod. The photographer told me to stay still. A flash of light and I'm done. Since I was the last from our class, the next class was called in and I went out on the other side of the room. Outside, I saw Mark and our friends standing in a small group. I went ahead and joined them, We had to wait while our teacher confirms the results with the photographer before going back to class. Digital cameras are used nowadays, so we would know the results instantly, instead of waiting for an hour to develop the film back in the analog days. The idea is that the haunteds would have their pictures altered, their heads would be missing from the pictures. From what I've learned from years of school reminders and the local news, is that the type of camera doesn't matter. So anyone can do this even with just a low-resolution phone camera at home. I know a lot of my classmates had their pictures taken already before coming here. The result is consistent. At least that was what we were told. And if you did try this at home and found that your kid is haunted, you still have to go to the nearest school or city hall, along with those who are homeschooled, out-of-school youth, or those who have no access to a camera, to notify local authorities so they can take your kid to the shelter. So that's additional, unnecessary work if your son or daughter is already attending school. That's why my parents and I figured I'd just have my picture taken here. But there really isn't a need for all of this. We could even have done this ourselves, take a selfie back at class and just report it, in private if you prefer, to your teacher. Some do. But even after seeing their picture with their head intact, a lot would still opt for the school's picture-taking thing. 1, because it's mandatory. The school is responsible for every student they have enrolled, so this system allows the school to have a record that shows every student present today underwent the identification procedure, absolving them of legal consequences. And 2, because having 2 sources confirming that you're not haunted is more assuring than just the selfie you took. When our teacher came out, all the chatter stopped. It was so quiet that the only thing I could hear was Mark taking a deep breath besides me. I'm not worried, though, waiting for what Mrs. Misaki was going to say. There are only 2 things that would happen right now. Either she walked up to the front of the line or she calls out a name. She paused for a bit, straightened her suit and cleared her throat.
Cana Bernardo.
Mrs. Misaki said. She scanned the line. When she found Cana, Mrs. Misaki approached her with quick, small steps. In her most gentle voice, she smiled. Can you come back inside, please? After that, Mrs. Misaki's turned and went back to the room in a hurry. I could have sworn to see her lips quivered. No, Cana whispered. No. The girl bursts down crying. I guess that's the downside of not taking a selfie, checking for yourself if you're haunted. When you actually got identified, well, you're not prepared. Her friends went to comfort her. One friend was hugging her. Another was holding out her handkerchief. When a teacher calls for a student after picture taking during the haunting month, there's usually only one good reason why. So even without Mrs. Misaki saying it, the message was clear to us all. She wanted to talk with Cana inside, where it's private and easier to break the news. Even with the knowledge that it's generally safe staying in the shelter, I guess some people just can't handle it.
Cana Bernardo.
I thought. Petite, olive skin. Her light brown hair falling in waves on her shoulders, a traditional Filipina morena beauty. I have to admit, there were times when I caught myself stealing glances at her. But it never got any further than that. Mrs. Misaki went out again. I thought she was just fetching Cana. The girl didn't move an inch from where she was standing, but instead, she cleared her throat again. She read out another name. Vergil Torres. This time, a smile was plastered across her face, but her eyes were screaming. This is what I like about Mrs. Misaki. She truly cares about us, her students, even though I couldn't care less about being haunted. To be honest, my first thought was how my trip with my parents this weekend will have to wait. Then she asked the class president to go back first. Mark and my friends exchanged some jokes about how lucky I am to skip school for a whole month and how they wish they were haunted in my place. See you, losers, I waved to them as they filed back up to class. Then Cana and I went back inside. Chapter 3. Once inside, Mrs. Misaki immediately told Cana and I were haunteds. Big surprise. She explained that we have to make our way to the clinic for an examination and we will be on our way to the shelter. Shall we? She said, gesturing to the door. But first I asked if I can see the picture. She nodded at the photographer who showed his digital camera to us. First was Cana's. It was like someone photoshopped her head out of the picture. From the base of her collar and up, there was nothing but the clock on the background, which wouldn't be seen if her head was there. Then mine, which was basically the same thing. Okay, seeing your headless body, even in a picture, definitely a bit creepy. But I've seen worse. After that, we walked out of the door. We tailed behind Mrs. Misaki as she escorts us to the clinic. More of a formality than necessary. We passed by classrooms full of students hunched down on test papers. For them, the exams continue. Sucks to be them, I thought. It's not that I didn't want to take the exam. I did study and everything. But if I was given a choice not to, I would take it. We reached the clinic and went inside. It was like any standard school clinic. White beds, divided by blue curtains. A wooden cabinet filled with bottles and boxes of medicine. On the wall was a blackboard with charts of the muscular, skeletal, and a whole lot of other systems of the human body pinned. By the window, there was a long desk with a potted planted and a picture frame facing backward from us. Behind it, sitting was the doctor, examining a folder that must be from the loosely stacked pile on his desk. "Good morning, Dr. Bernardo," Mrs. Misaki greeted. The doctor went around the table to greet us. He had short black hair that was brushed to one side and neatly trimmed mustache. Under his white lab coat was a blue shirt. A stethoscope was hanging around his neck. I've always wondered why doctors do that. Is it mandatory? Was wear your stethoscope around your shoulders at all times part of their job description? Cana leaped to Dr. Bernardo and gave him a bear hug. Dr. Bernardo hugged her tight in return. "Hi, sweetie," he said. When they break away, Cana had the biggest smile. Now, I never made the connection before. There are a lot of Bernardos in this school, so this is a surprise for me. Mrs. Misaki said. "They're here for their physical." Another guy came up to us too. A friendly-looking dude with dark skin and long, springy black hair. He's wearing a standard blue uniform for school nurses. On his left chest, there was a tag that reads Aaron Johnson. "I see," Dr. Bernardo said. He cast his eyes downwards. He pulled Cana in, wrapping his arms around his precious daughter. No words exchanged between them. Seeing Cana here was enough explanation. Mrs. Misaki cleared her throat. "Doctor, please, right?" Dr. Bernardo replied. He told us to store our bags behind his desk and ordered Aaron to get us ready, at which point Mrs. Misaki took her leave. It was all pretty basic stuff. Exactly what you would expect from a physical examination. First was a questionnaire about our medical history. Then they recorded our height and weight. After that, the doctor wrapped a dark fabric that squeezes my arm. Then Cana and I took turns reading a chart with a black plastic spoon covering one of my eyes and sat still while Dr. Bernardo placed the cold, circular metal of his stethoscope on different points of my chest and back as he directs me when to inhale and exhale. "And we're done," the school nurse, Aaron, said after drawing blood from my arm. He put a ball of cotton to stop the bleeding and fixed it in place with white, transparent tape. Immediately, I felt a bit lightheaded. So when we're asked to stay put, I didn't mind at all. We had to wait in case someone else was identified as haunted, but most, if not everyone, should already have finished taking their pictures while we were having our physical. And since no one else came here, that means that at this school, Cana and I are it. But still, Aaron volunteered to confirm with the other teachers. Cana and Dr. Bernardo sat at one of the beds, talking about their favorite television shows. They were like best friends chatting over a cup of coffee. And by talking, I mean Cana babbles while her dad nods, occasionally giving a short comment or cracking up a joke. They both know that they won't be seeing each other for another month, so they're stretching every second they have to make up for a month worth of bonding. When Aaron came back, he saw the two and just stood in silence beside me. "Are you going to break that up?" I asked him. He just smiled. "Let's give them a minute more. How do you feel?" "Fine," I said. The floating feeling in my head was gone. Dr. Bernardo looked at our direction and Aaron took the chance to inform the doctor that no one else was coming, implying that we should get going now. Sweetie," Dr. Bernardo said. He turned his attention back to Cana, who gave him one last hug and said goodbye. Dr. Bernardo held Cana at arm's length. "I'll see you soon, okay?" he said. Cana nodded. This time, it was Aaron who chaperoned us to our ride, a yellow van with black stripes. The words, "Padua School Service," were painted on its side. "Take care, guys," Aaron said and turned. Our school driver slid the door open and we climbed inside. After making sure the door is locked, he went to the front and started the car. The engine sputtered to life and we were on our way. I had my elbow on the armrest of the door's panel, propping up my chin as I stared out of the window, watching my school disappear from view. Chapter 4. Since we have to leave our bags in DR. Taylor's clinic, I only have with me my phone, earphones, and my wallet inside my pants. It's a good thing too because I have a feeling that Cana is not in the mood to chat. She wasn't crying anymore, but she's visibly still upset. I tried thinking of what to say to ease the mood a bit, but I don't even know where to start. Obviously, her dad and family are off limits. Talking about school stuff doesn't make sense now. I thought of telling her a horse-related knock-knock joke, but I think that would make her cry again. It also doesn't help that I've never really talked with her before. I mean, not never, but we didn't exactly have the most scintillating of conversations. It was usually her telling me that the teacher was looking for me or reminding me to return this pen she lent me for the millionth time. Not that I had problems talking to other people. It's just that I have my friends and she has hers. And the thought of making friends with her didn't really cross my mind. We never had any real reason to talk. My hand reached for the left breast pocket of my blazer, where Cana's pen still is. I really need to give this back. I thought, okay, the reason I keep forgetting to give it back was because this pen has a hidden knife inside. It's like Percy Jackson's Riptide, except that it's not magical, or made of celestial bronze, and it doesn't actually transform into a sword. But other than that, it's just like Riptide. I should probably say something because the longer this goes on, the more awkward and harder it will be later on. Oh, I can just hear my dad's voice yelling at me to stop overthinking. I turned to face her. Hey, I'm sorry you had to see all that, Cana said. Or she can start. That works too. I thought. You seemed really freaked out. Are you okay? Oh, she said while wiping her tears with her sleeves. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. It's just that I've never been away from home, from my parents. It's all so sudden, you know. She paused, hugging her elbows close to her chest. And now, I'm staying in a creepy place for a month with people I don't know. And there's that literal shadow demon that will try to murder us every night. I added. She glared at me. Not cool. Sorry, I said. But you have nothing to worry about. Biringan's been safe for 20 years. We're safe. You're safe. She looked down at her lap, her hands gripping her skirt. It's just, I've never been all on my own before. I tried for my friendliest smile. How about this? If you want, we could hang out, have lots of fun, and before you know it, the months passed. She lifted her head up and looked at me. The sun was at her back, making her smile even more blinding. Her brown eyes trained on mine. Really? Yeah, it'll be fun. I don't know. She gave a cheeky, playful smile. You keep stealing my pen so. I snorted. You remember, huh? Hard to forget, especially when it's sitting right there. She said, looking down at the chest pocket of my uniform. I took the pen and handed it to her. I swear I had every intention of returning it. She giggled. Keep it. Already bought another. The more we talk, the more I realize that she's cool. She has an older brother, loves strawberries, and doesn't take herself too seriously. But of course, most of our topics come back to something she and her dad had done. And I thought that mentioning her dad was taboo. We're here, our school driver said, which was the only time he spoke during the entire drive. Time really does fly when you're having fun because when we stepped out, we were standing between an unfamiliar place and a military checkpoint. There was a tall, concrete wall with CCTVs and barbed wire on top that encloses the densely forested area behind it. I read unfriendly signs like government property, no trespassing, and personnel are authorized to use deadly force. An armored military vehicle was passing by at the moment, no doubt patrolling the area. A crew was manning the machine gun mounted on top of it. There were other armed soldiers on duty, too. One of them approached our driver. Where are we? Cana asked. I looked back at the city behind us. Tall buildings, antique church, none of which I recognized. No idea. The soldier went up to us, holding a clipboard. He looked at me, flipped through his clipboard, then back at me. When he was satisfied, he turned to Cana and did the same. All right, he said. Then he proceeded to explain what was going to happen. Apparently, our driver can only deliver us here. They will take us the rest of the way. He ushered us into a black SUV and we climbed inside. The metal gates creaked as the soldiers pushed it open. Cana leaned over the driver's seat. "Can you please tell us where we are?" The soldier glanced at us through the rear view mirror. "You're not in Padua High anymore. That's all you need to know." "How did you know where we're from?" I asked. "Why can't our driver take us there?" "Only military personnel are allowed to take you there," he said, his eyes on the road, clearly ignoring my first question. "Besides," our driver continued, glancing up again at the mirror, "your school van isn't built for this terrain." I looked out of the window and saw he was right. There was no road, just dirt and rocks. "But an SUV can." I asked. "Oh, this isn't your mom's SUV that she drives when she picks you up at school," he said. "Oh no, this baby is built for climbing up rocky, uneven mountains. Lifted suspensions, 16 inches wheels wearing Kevlar reinforced, all-terrain tires, thick, skid plates, under the hood, a 5.7 V8 engine." I tuned out at this point. I don't speak car nerd, so I have no idea what he was saying. I looked at Cana. She shook her head. I still have a few questions I want to ask, but he was so excited when he started explaining the off-road turn assistance system installed. So we just let him ramble on as he drives us uphill, showing off what his baby can do. Chapter 5. After half an hour of a bumpy drive on an unmarked trail, zigzagging through the thick maze of identical trees, we finally arrived at our destination, a clearing in the middle of nowhere, which in itself was a miracle. As soon as we got off the SUV, it turned around and drove away, leaving us in front of a 2-story, modern, rectangular building. Street lamps ringed the place. I spotted at least 4 armed soldiers at the rooftop. A glass door was at the center of the building. The door slid open and a guy stepped out. When he saw us, he went straight up to us. "Welcome to Biringan," he greeted with a huge smile. "You're the last to arrive." His friendly demeanor stands in contrast to his intimidating looks. Tall and dark-skinned. His dark hair was shaved crew-cut style. He was wearing beige cargo pants, white sneakers, and a black t-shirt that was way too small for him, or his chest was just way too big for his t-shirt. "Right this way," he said as he ushered us inside the building. He didn't introduce himself or asked our names, which was very weird. And it was a bit awkward at this point to ask for his name, so we just followed behind him towards the glass door in silence. The door slid open automatically as we approach, blasting us with cool air. We slide along the smooth, tiled floor. The place was lightly decorated with huge, black vases, potted plants, some paintings, and furniture. It was like any other dorm I've seen. Inside, there were other teenagers. 5 guys and 4 girls, all wearing uniforms from different schools. Then there's this one girl sitting at the bottom of the steps of the split staircase. She stood out easily in her blue, knee-length, one-piece dress with long sleeves. Her raven black hair braided on one side, creating a fish-like tail that rests over her shoulder. Everything about her is elegant, like she was going to the prom, except for the white running shoes she's wearing. And she's also the only one with her luggage with her. So she's either homeschooled or out of school. Based on her looks, I'm going with homeschooled. "All right, listen up," our buff guide shouted. All of us formed a semicircle around him. He was accompanied by a middle-aged man with graying hair and a balding head. "I am Major Lewis Coleman, and I will be giving you your orientation," he said, smiling. His voice was loud and lively. "For the entire month, you will be living here with your fellow haunteds and with Mr. Marino here." He gestured to the man on his side, isolated from the rest of the city, not only for your safety from the shade, but also to avoid the repeat of the dark year. He then proceeded to give a quick recap of the shade history, all the way to the beginning of the first appearances of the shade to the dark year that led to the construction of the shelter Biringan. Not that we need reminding of the dark year. It was taught in our history class as part of the curriculum of the subject, so almost everyone knows about it. I've seen a documentary about it once. It was when UV lights were first installed inside homes, preventing the deaths of haunteds. But because of that, another problem arose. The shade never seemed to hurt other people, only haunteds. But that didn't stop the general public to blame every misfortune, sudden deaths, and mysterious illnesses to the shade for years. Over the years, the fear of shade then turned into hate for the haunteds. Many of them were ostracized, bullied, and harassed. They feared for their lives on a daily basis. Even their families received death threats. Then the worst year came, the dark year. During this year, paranoia solidified to the mass hysteria of killing innocent kids. The public persecuted the haunteds. The UV lights that once protected them had now painted them targets for scared neighbors. Several stories of mobs invading homes, breaking down barricaded doors and dragging terrified kids, and in some cases, even their family, outside to be executed by a cheering crowd, were all over the evening news for weeks. There was an incident with a school where a crowd had gathered outside the school gates, waiting for the suspected haunted, and ambushed the poor kid with clubs and stones, killing the 16-year-old in front of his classmates. I remembered the most was the poor family of only a single mother and her son, without any other relatives to help them. So when the mob came for her boy, the mother could only watch helplessly on the side as her kid was being butchered in front of her. It was brutal. The most superstitious of the mobs tied haunteds outside at night for the shade to kill, believing that by doing so, the shade would not harm them or their businesses spared from misfortunes. Shootouts between the police and the families protecting their kids against the mobs got so bad that the city was placed under martial law. Once the month had passed, everything returned to normal. The murderous community apologized to the families and their victims. The prisons were overcrowded with the flood of criminals. News of the incident was covered all over the world, dubbing it the modern Salem witch trial. The Vatican offered masses and prayers for all the people of our city. When the killing stopped and people came to their senses, the death toll reached 150, 138 more unnecessary deaths compared to what should have been only 12. To ensure the dark year never happens again, the government established Biringan. Major Coleman ended. After the history lesson, he explained that there are 6 rooms on the first floor. To our left were the dining hall and the storage room. To our right were the arcade and the movie theater. Behind us were the laundry room and the clinic with the split staircase at the center. First things first, Major Coleman said, gesturing to the table near the entrance door. We have our suggestion box here for complaints or requests, should you have any. Then he led us to the dining hall first, which was both the kitchen and the dining area. It's like one of those high-end, luxury kitchen and dining rooms I only see pictures of. To the far left was the kitchen sink with a window view to the trees outside. Electric stoves were installed on the countertop made of granite. I say granite because it's the only stone that I could think of with an exhaust vent hanging above. An oven was built into the wall, next to a refrigerator with double doors and multiple drawers. On our side were 3 square, rustic dining tables with glass vases holding decorative flowers. Each table had 4 chairs padded with soft, silvery cushions. I hope you know how to cook, Major Coleman said, grinning. Oh great, I can't cook a real meal. And I have a feeling Foodpanda doesn't make deliveries here, so ordering Jollibee is probably not an option. But we had home economics class, so I can at least fry eggs and pre-cooked hams, so worst case scenario I'll be eating processed foods for the rest of the month. What about those who can't cook? A girl said with a sheepish grin. Her skin was a golden tan, looks athletic, and her blonde hair was pulled into a simple ponytail. It's not hard to guess that her family are descendants from the foreigners who settled here because of their interest in the shade. Anyone here knows how to cook? Major Coleman said. At least half of us raised their hands. Does cup noodles count? The guy with short, spiky hair with brown skin said. The room burst into laughter. We'll count it, Major Coleman said, still smiling. Well, that's what Mr. Marino is here for. Besides, I'm sure you can find something to eat in the storage room. Major Coleman must have realized it was almost lunch because he instructed Mr. Marino to prepare our meals. We left Mr. Marino behind as the tour continued through the door on the right, connecting this room to the storage room. We made sure to stock on only fresh and new products every October, so you don't have to worry about eating anything from last year. Major Coleman explained. The storage room was like a convenience store minus the counter and ATMs. Rows of different bags of chips, cookies, and an assortment of baking ingredients and canned goods take up most of the space of the room. The walls were lined with large refrigerators with glass doors filled with soft drinks and bottled beverages. Upright freezers kept meat, hot dogs, and other frozen products. And there's also a refrigerator for fruits and vegetables like the ones on display in supermarkets. And of course, everything's free, Major Coleman said. Everyone who, and scattered, disappearing behind the rows of goods. I rushed on to check what kind of candy they have. Sweet. They have gummy bears. A scrawny kid with short, messy hair next to me said, comparing packets of gummy bears he's holding. I say kid because the embroidered emblem on his uniform reads Damien Middle School. I think he's the only middle school student here. When he noticed me, he got up immediately. Oh, hello, he said, extending his hand. A full smile was on his face. I'm Demi Clive. Vergil Torres, I said, shaking his hand. Can you believe this? Free gummy bears. His voice got super high when he said that. You want one? I do love gummy bears, so I took it. Thanks, man. Did you know that the green gummy bears are actually strawberry flavored? He continued. At least for this brand. Major Coleman clapped his hands. All right, that's enough, he said. Despite being a major and all, he was being very patient with us, so he's starting to look less intimidating. Let's continue with the tour. We all gathered and followed him towards another door and were back at the visitors' lounge. We were walking towards the other side of the dorm, which he explained was divided into an arcade and a movie theater. At the door, Major Coleman stopped and faced us. A broad smile spread across his face. You're going to love this one, he said and opened the door. Chapter 6. We rushed inside to the arcade room. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. Huya. This is awesome. But we don't have our wallets with us. Demi asked Major Coleman. How are we going to play? While Major Coleman explained to him that all the games were rigged with infinite credits, I looked around. The place was like, well, an arcade but with more stuff. There were the usual games. A House of the Dead 4 horror shooting game, Initial D racing game, and a basketball game with a high score of 135 points. That won't be hard to beat. Caprice and Harmony were checking out the Dance Revolution game that's in the center of the room. Unlike the old Dance Revolution game that uses a dance pad, this one is played with motion sensor cameras. There were a dozen desktop computers arranged in a way that users would be sitting across each other. I'm guessing the setup is to prevent cheating during team games. Maybe previous Haunteds complained about it before. On the other side of the room, there were flat-screen televisions attached to the wall, connected to a couple of PlayStation 4 so at least 4 people can play at a time. Why not get PS5s? I asked Major Coleman. Put in a request, Major Coleman said, and we'll make it happen. Why do you have that? Indigo asked Major Coleman, her finger pointed at the Japanese photo booth, Purikura. We're all going to be headless, right? Last year's Haunteds were adventurous, Major Coleman said. They want photos of themselves without their heads. For what? Souvenirs. Indigo said. Weirdos. Sounds fun, actually, Kent said. Wanna take one? Indigo scowled. Pass. I scanned the arcade again. At the far back, there was another room. Hey, wanna check that out? I asked Cana, pointing to the room. Her lips curled up to the sides. Sure. Peering through the large windows, I could see that, inside, it was a karaoke room. There was just one karaoke machine. A sofa set was arranged in AU with a glass table in the middle. I wish they had individual rooms instead, Cana said. Are you shy? You shouldn't be. I've heard you sing with your friends all the time. Your voice doesn't suck. She stared at me in disbelief. Was that supposed to be a compliment? Yeah. What's that face for? She sighed, shaking her head. No wonder you never had a girlfriend. Why, I gasped. It was so unexpected that my brain just froze. Why bring that up all of a sudden? There literally was nothing leading up to that. And how did she know? I mean, it's not really a secret, but I don't broadcast my love life to everyone in class either. Listen, Major Coleman shouted. He had to, otherwise he wouldn't get our attention. And good timing too, because I really don't have a clever comeback. You can come back later anytime you want, but for now, let's move on with the tour. I thought there was another door connecting this room to the movie theater, but instead, we filed out of the room, back to the visitors' lounge. We entered the last exciting room on the first floor, the movie theater. The screen was just an empty wall on one side of the room. On the opposite side, There was a movie projector mounted on its stand. A laptop was connected to it. In between were 2 rows of seats. Each row have 6 single-seat gray couches complete with armrest and cup holders. A square-shaped air conditioner was installed into the ceiling above. Compared to the previous 3, this room is pretty small. The laptop had hundreds of movies you can choose from, Major Coleman said. Of course, don't expect any new ones. How cool is it to have your own movie theater? Best of all, we won't have to sit through trailers. I just hope the drive is not filled with documentaries and inspired by real events movies about the shade. I'm sick of those. Ever since news of the phenomenon spread throughout the world, journalists and filmmakers had been flooding our city, hoping to shoot the next big hit. There are still some groups protesting about them, saying that they are exploiting the deaths of children for profit. But that didn't stop movies from being made. To their defense, it was all about honoring the victims of this terrible phenomenon and most definitely had nothing to do with the millions of dollars that they make. There's even a movie about a love story between the shade and a girl, which was pretty stupid. And of course, it became the blockbuster of last year. Tourism exploded because of that, so it's not all bad. Although, it's been a while since I've heard about a new movie or a documentary about the shade. All right, let's move it along, Major Coleman said. There really isn't much to see here, so nobody complained. We came out of the movie theater and took a quick glance at the last 2 rooms. The laundry room was just like any laundromat. The walls on either side of the room were lined with self-service laundry machines and dryers. At the center was a metal bench with blue, plastic seats arranged back to back. There was a shelf with laundry detergents and fabric softeners at the far end of the room. No one was impressed, and Major Coleman didn't even try hype the place up, so we moved on to the clinic. The room looked exactly what a clinic should look like: the doctor's desk, the cabinet full of medicines, medical equipment. We are equipped to handle the usual fever, cold, minor cuts and injuries. For specialized care, your doctors will notify me and we will provide. You'll meet your doctors tomorrow. They work day and night shifts unless there's a need for them to stay in. The tour continued up to the 2nd floor, which was just a hallway of white doors. Your rooms will be assigned to you later on, Major Coleman explained. The keys are down below. He opened one and we take a look inside. It was a simple, semi-furnished room with cabinets, a single bed, and a white mattress, lamp table with drawer. An AC was installed above the doorway. It was spacious enough for at least 5 people, but with everyone wanting to come in, it was getting too crowded, so I went outside, elbowing people in the ribs on my way out. There were groaning and complaining, but I didn't care. In the hallway, others were tiptoeing behind the doorway and jumping over the backs of the ones in front of him. He probably gave up on entering the room because he's like, super skinny. I imagine that if he forced his way in, his shoulder might pop or something. After a few minutes, Major Coleman ordered everyone to get out. Each room has its bathroom, complete with everything you'll need: soaps, toothpaste, first aid kit, he explained as he closed the room. He didn't show us the rooftop, which was weird, and led us straight back down and had us gather once again at the visitors' lounge, ending the tour. All right, let's establish some house rules, Major Coleman said. He recited some common do's and don'ts like separate the garbage and clean up as you go and all that. Look above, he said. We did. On the ceiling were circular light bulbs, along with sprinklers and smoke detectors. All rooms have the same devices installed, Major Coleman said. He explained that the lights emit regular and UV light. At 5:30 p.m., the UV light switches on automatically and shuts off every morning at 6 o'clock. The differing sunrises and sunsets are already accounted for in the schedule. They also have a backup power source so blackouts wouldn't be a problem. The switches are only for regular lights, so turning it off won't affect the UV lights. The street lamps and wall lights outside also emits UV lights, positioned in a way that it surrounds the building in a circle, leaving no blind spots where the shade could materialize from. Rest assured that you are perfectly safe so long as you stay within the lights, Major Coleman said. His expression turned serious. Now, inside the table in your room, you'll find your handbook. It contains all the information about the shade, what we know about it, and how to deal with it. The cheerful mood earlier was gone now. The room fell silent, waiting for him to continue. Only the humming of the AC could be heard. To read it, you must use the UV lights attached to the cap of the pen found inside, he said. Familiarize yourselves about the shade, and keep the handbook up to date. We kept quiet. Cana and I gave each other a look. What do you mean, keep it up to date? Fish Braids Girl said. I mean that you will be observing the shade tonight, you will monitor its behavior, and you will write down anything you see that isn't in the handbook, no matter how insignificant it may seem. Major Coleman addressed us with a serious look on his face. Every morning I'll come back and we will have a meeting. The topic would be your observations from the night before. Understood. Nobody answered. All the information you'll find in the handbook were studies done by generations of haunteds, he said, picking up on our confusion. There is still a lot we don't know about the shade. No one's still figured out what it is, even after all these years. This is the first time I've heard of studying the shade. How exactly does he expect us to do that? How did the previous haunteds do it? Nobody told me we had to take field notes of the shade. Relax. I'm not asking you to get up close to the shade, he said, as if he can read our minds, or probably just guessed, which is not hard because looking around, most have frightened expressions on their faces. You will just observe the shade from a distance and compare what you see with what we have right now. Mr. Donovan will, of course, supervise you, so you have nothing to worry about. Donovan. Don't you mean Mr. Marino? Blonde ponytail girl said. Right, Major Coleman said. Thank you for bringing that up. I apologize, but I forgot to mention. There is another caretaker. Mr. Marino will only be with you until 5:30 p.m. His replacement, Mr. Donovan, works the night shift. He'll supervise your shade study and take care of all your needs during the night. In case of emergencies, Mr. Donovan will let me know. Are we going to spend every night by ourselves? For the entire month? Demi asked, shuffling on his feet. No, Major Coleman said. He began explaining that his men on the rooftop are in rotation every 8 hours. And with Mr. Marino and Mr. Donovan, along with our doctors, so there won't be a time any of you will be all alone. Look, I know you're scared, but there's a reason why there hadn't been any deaths these last decades. The system works. Trust the system. Trust us and we will keep you safe. Major Coleman promised. If he was trying to make us feel better about all this, it didn't work. Why not use CCTVs? I asked. Because I thought that would be the most effective and safest way to do it. Because cameras couldn't see the shade, Major Coleman sighed. Read the handbook. It has all the answers to your questions. There was a long silence as we tried to take it all in. Well, if no one was any more questions, then you are dismissed, Major Coleman said. You are welcome to wait here for your luggage, of course. Oh, and if you haven't eaten yet, Mr. Marino is already preparing lunch. But I don't think any of us had any appetite, not after hearing that news. For the first time, ever since being identified as a haunted, I can't help feeling scared. It's not like I'm not taking any of this seriously. The threat of the shade is real. I get that. I guess it just doesn't feel real. But the secrecy, the isolation, and all these military precautions, it changes my perspective on this whole shade business, and made me realize just how serious the danger we were in. Chapter 7. It was past lunch when my baggage came. Each was labeled with the name of the owner since our parents cannot hand them personally to us, for obvious reasons. Major Coleman assigned us rooms by giving us keys with numbered, wooden key rings attached to it. Mine was room 6, a room just above the glass sliding door we came in. I was halfway done with unpacking my stuff, which mostly are clothes good for a month, when I remembered about the handbook Major Coleman was talking about. I went to the lamp table and pulled open the drawer. Inside was a simple notebook, the words Haunted's Handbook engraved with white ink, in contrast to the black cover. Same as with the number 6 in the center, the number of my room. I took it out, sat on my bed, and ran my fingers on its cover. It's some sort of fabric. It felt like touching the surface of a sofa. I opened it. There was an extra space where a pen is held by a strap. The first page reads Top Secret. For Biringan personnel and Haunted's eyes only. It described the shade, although Mr. Chua did describe the shade to our class already. The information here is more detailed. Below it was a set of shade rules that we were supposed to familiarize ourselves with if we wanted to survive throughout the month of October. Like how the shade originally kills haunteds. Apparently, according to Shade Rule 1, once a shade latched on a haunted, the haunted will fall into a catatonic state, usually leading to cardiac arrest. Doctors weren't able to do anything once the haunting took place since drugs seemed to have no effect on the body. I kept reading. I already know that the lights protect us from the shade. But what I didn't know is how exactly. Apparently, according to Shade Rule 4, the shade ceased to exist under the light. It went on to explain that the shade doesn't simply disappear from the naked eye, all supernatural traces of it disappear, but will reform again in another place safe from the lights. I bet this rule is based on the theory of Mrs. Roth, the one who discovered the use of the lights. I've read about her on our trip to the Shade Museum for history class. She's got a whole gallery dedicated to her with her monument, self-portraits, everything. She was a hero. I've remembered reading that after her kid died, she took a passionate interest in the shade. That passion eventually led her to conclude that only sunlight can affect the shade because the shade never appears during the day, even in dark places safe from sunlight under the bed, inside the closet, and only appears at night. And apparently she tried everything else. Fire, flashlights, and anything that casts light, because at its base the shade is still a shadow. So she passed on her theory to the government, and the military tested the only thing we have closest to sunlight, the lights. It was a short read, ending in Shade Rule 5. The shade cannot be captured or recorded by any devices, like Major Coleman said. Not really sure how the last one was going to help, but it does explain why there was never a picture of the shade. I closed the handbook, put it down beside me, and lie on my back. Years of studying, observing the shade, and all they have is this. My mind is having a hard time to believe it. I would have read it again if it weren't for someone knocking at my door. I sat up and jumped off my bed to open the door. It was a girl. "Hey, we're having a karaoke party," she said, smiling. "I was wondering if maybe you wanted to join us." "Sure," I said. "I've been meaning to get to know my dorm mates, so this is just perfect." I extended my hand. "I'm Vergil, by the way." She reached for it. "Harmony," she said. She looked over my shoulder. "You haven't unpacked yet. Do you need help?" "Nah, I'll be okay. But thanks. I'll see you there." "Okay. See you." I put the handbook away and finished unpacking. I grabbed my key and ran downstairs. When I got inside the arcade room, it was surprisingly empty, except for one girl playing Tekken 7 on PlayStation 4. "Hey," I called out. "They're having a party inside. Weren't you invited?" "Oh, I was," Cana said. She trailed off, her eyes fixed on the flat-screen television, doing a 10-hit combo with Asuka. "Man, this girl is good." The in-game voice announced K.O. as the 2 letters flashed on the screen. She rested the controller on her lap and stretched her arms up. "I was waiting for you." "Oh, let's go then." "Yeah, totally," she said. She handed me a controller. "Do you play?" I took the controller. "It's really not that fun beating girls in video games." "Oh, you were so dead." It was a standard best of 3. Let's just say my Brian's seen better days. "You're right," Cana said. "It's no fun beating a girl in video games." I laughed. "How are you so good at this?" "It's Dad's favorite," Cana confessed. "Of course it is," I said. "Well, we should probably go inside. They're waiting for us." "Sure. Let's just casually sing in front of complete strangers. Sounds fun. You don't have to sing, you know." Cana crosses her arms over her chest. "Oh, please. It's karaoke. I'm not a buzzkill." "I don't get it. You literally sang in front of people before. You sang Happy Birthday to Mrs. Misaki in class. That's different. They're our classmates, my friends. Is that why you've been waiting for me out here? You're feeling shy." "I'm not shy. I'm stranger avoidant." "Stranger avoidant," I said, hardly containing the grin spreading over my face. "Look, all I'm saying is that there should be some degree of familiarity. I need to know them first. Otherwise, I might end up sounding like a goat being butchered." I laughed. "Now you make me very curious." She hit my shoulder. "Okay, if it comes to it, we'll sing duet. High school musical style," I said, rubbing my shoulder, still laughing. "So you won't have to do it alone. We'll be like Troy and Gabriella, but less attractive and can't sing." She suddenly got quiet. I thought that was a good joke, but she just kept staring at me. Troy and Gabriella got together, she said. She brushed her hair behind her ear and looked at me. Is that what you're saying? That we should? All the blood in my body rushed to my cheeks when I realized what just happened. Oh, wow. Haha, that's not, I swear I didn't kidding, she said, laughing. You're so easy it's not even fun. I'm starting to regret ever talking to you, I said. She powered down the PlayStation 4 and got up. Come on, Troy. I followed her inside. There were 5 more people already singing and laughing. Everyone was still in their uniforms. There was Demi, Harmony, and 2 of whom had already made an impression back at the dining area, Blonde Ponytail Girl and Spiky Boy. They were sitting on the sofa, singing along with another guy standing next to the karaoke, holding the wireless microphone, belting to Ed Sheeran's Dive. When he saw us, he waved with his free hand. I waved back at him while he continued hitting those high notes, making Spiky Boy and Harmony hoo-hoo. The glass table was filled with a bag of potato chips, paper cups, and a couple of 2L bottles of Mountain Dew. I gave Demi a nod, which he returned. When the guy finished the song, he joined us on the couch. Blonde Ponytail Girl stood up. You guys, let's stop for a bit and have everyone introduce themselves, she said. There you go again, doing things on a whim, Great Pipes guy said. What? Blonde Ponytail said. What's wrong with that? Didn't it occur to you that maybe someone here hates introducing themselves to complete strangers and now you've put them completely on the spot? Great Pipes guy said. I immediately thought of Cana. I turned to my left and saw her chatting it up with Harmony. Despite her stranger-avoidant condition, she's actually doing pretty well. I think it's a great idea, Harmony said, temporarily suspending her chat with Cana. This is the perfect opportunity to get to know each other, considering we'll be staying here for a while. Plus, it makes first meetings less awkward. See, Blonde Ponytail Girl said to Great Pipes guy. I'll start, she continued. My name is Eris Mitchell from Lorenzo High. With him, she said, nodding at him who was sitting by her side. He grabbed Eris' wrist and pulled her down. I'm Leo Garcia, yes, the Leo Garcia, he said, beaming. He looks like he was waiting for us to gush over him for some reason, so I shot Cana a look. You know him? She gave her head a quick shake. Not a clue. He's the lead singer from our school's band, so he thinks he's such a big deal. Eris explained while facepalming herself. I am a big deal, Leo emphasized, leaning on the table. She's just jealous that I'm getting all the attention, he said almost as a whisper, as if Eris cannot hear anything. I'm not as vain as you, so I don't really care, Eris said. But I'll have you know, some guy asked me out for a movie last week. I just told him no because of tennis practice. Leo looked at us and shook his head. Complete lie. How dare you? Eris said, punching Leo on his shoulder. I know you're both from the same school and all, but do you know each other? I asked. Don't be silly, Harmony said to me. They're obviously been dating for a while. Eris just rolled her eyes. Ugh. Here we go again. I could have sworn seeing a ghost of a smile flashed on Leo's face. But he grabbed potato chips by the claw and shoved them in his mouth, so I didn't give it much thought. Our parents are close friends, Leo said. Oh, childhood friends. That sucks, I said. Leo shrugged. Well, what can you do? My parents are childhood friends, Harmony said. Now they have me. Eris made a disgusted face. With this guy? No way. That's like, super weird. It was so funny that it was impossible not to laugh and feel sad for Leo. But Leo looked more annoyed than hurt. Well, I'm not exactly excited being paired with a girl whose idea of fashion is a sweaty tracksuit. I'm the team captain of the tennis club. Of course, I'm gonna get sweaty, genius. You're wearing them every time I come over. Slob. Well, you always come over right after practice, creep. So, Harmony interjected in a loud voice, almost a shout. How about I go next? She sat up straight and brought out a sweet and friendly smile. Hello, everyone. My name is Harmony Adams. My friends call me Harmy, but if you have a better nickname, I'd love to hear them, she said as her attention jumps from person to person. I hope we all get along. Then she gestured at Spiky Boy across her. You want me to? Okay, he said, putting down his cup. I'm Kent. Kent Edwards, same school as Miss Congeniality here. And I mean that literally. It sucks you didn't want the entire thing, by the way. Harmony giggled. Thank you. Wait, What are we talking about? Eris said. She almost won Miss Senior High. Kent said. Oh no. Eris said. What happened? I sort of failed hard during the question and answer portion. Harmony explained. But you'd still won Miss Congeniality, Eris said in awe. That's amazing. I'd say it's well-deserved, Leo said, turning into some fake art expert scrutinizing every detail of a beautiful painting that is Harmony. I stared at Harmony for a bit. She was about my height. Slender figure. She pulled the top of her straight, dark hair up into a bun while letting her sides and back loose. Her chocolate skin accentuates the red shade of lipstick she's wearing. She's pretty all right, and she seemed to be someone cool to hang out with, so can't say I'm crazy about her, though. What? Cana said when she noticed me staring at her. I leaned over to whisper in her ear. You going to be okay? I'm next, you know. I think so. Kent gestured for me, so I introduced myself. Cana went next, who basically just rapped out her name. Then, of course, Demi went last. Kent let out a satisfied ah after drinking soda from his cup. Now that we got that out of the way, can we talk about this place? No school, no homework, and we're practically free to do whatever we want. This place is awesome. Yeah, no phone, no internet, Leo complained. He was busy looking at a square hand mirror he's holding. He keeps tossing his already hard from wax black hair with ash-gray highlights up into messy waves. Then he pulled a piece down and twirled it into a curl. I thought he was going to return the mirror to Eris. I assumed it's hers, but instead, he slides it into the left breast pocket of his uniform. Dude brings his own mirror. Who does that? How am I supposed to vlog now? To ensure that our location remains hidden, Major confiscated our phones. Also, the dorm has no phone lines, no internet, probably because of haunteds like Leo here, who might just drop a day in the life of a haunted video. Eris rolled her eyes. Will you die if you can't vlog for a month? No, Leo replied. But my channel will if I don't post regularly. He took a sip from his cup. And I just started putting out ads. They don't trust that we'll keep the shade a secret. Kent said. And yet, we're supposed to take notes of this thing. Leo said. Why not do it themselves? Isn't it because of Shade Rule 2? Demi said. Can't be helped. Shade Rule 2. The shade will materialize as close to a haunted as possible. However, the shade must have a direct line of sight of a haunted for it to materialize. I recalled. So if we stayed inside, where the shade can't materialize because of the UV lights, then it will have to materialize outside. But since it won't see any of us inside the dorm, it will not materialize at all. Let's leave all shade talk for tonight, Eris suggested. When Mr. Donovan arrives. Yeah, right now is for this party. Kent cheered. My mom never lets me do whatever I want, so. He grabbed his drink, held it out in front of him and sang Freedom. With vibrato. We all followed suit and matched his voice. Laughing.